Hi, this is Nancy Rolfsema with Quilting with Nancy. Thank you very much for joining me on our continuing series of the Four Crossings quilt. So this is the fifth part. If you've missed any of the other parts, please go back so that you're actually keeping up with us as we go. So in the first section, we learned how to do the precision piecing on this center square. The second video was how to do the crossing squares with all of these cool connecting corners and setting triangles. The third video was the applique, the machine applique, fusible applique, which looked sort of like this. So with this one, the center block is fusible applique with the blanket stitch and the outside corners. Well, now we are going to start working on the setting, the square in the squares on this block. So this is the one that I call the complete pieced one. So on the quilt behind me, it is these blocks here. Now the last session, part 4, I showed you how to do it with precise piecing, just being very cautious with your cutting and your sewing and your seam allowance so that you could actually chain piece the blocks. That is not many people's favorite way of doing this technique. It happens to be my favorite way because I like how fast it goes, and I kind of strive for that precision, but it's not for everybody. So for those of you that do not think that you want to have to deal with the precise piecing, ta-da, I bring you foundation piecing. Foundation piecing is consistently considered the most precise way to piece quilts, and especially blocks like this. So let's get started. So we're going to start by showing you the design. So this is the one that I'm doing. This is my coloring that I've done in electric quilt, and this is the block that we are making. Keep in mind, the book actually comes with just some black and white pages so that you can color the quilt any way that you like and kind of help you keep everything straight, because that sometimes is the most confusing part. This is my first block, the center block that has the precise piecing and the setting and the flying geese here. This is one of the crossing blocks using connecting corners here and setting triangles and then the large setting triangles. And for those that you might be new to this is what I'm calling my TARDIS quilt, because I'd found this space fabric with the sun and the moons and the stars, and I'm pretty sure this fabric was 20 some years old. But then I also found in my stash some TARDIS fabric, which is Doctor Who's time machine. That's time and relative dimension in space, for those of you that don't know. And I am pretty sure I got this fabric off of Spoonflower, again, years ago, but I thought this was the time to use it. So here's the book. I guess I should show you the cover of that, although that was the opening slide. There is the book. All right, and it has instructions for both the applique and the piece design. Keeping in mind, you can combine the two of them. And here is the step-by-step instructions on doing the foundation piecing. So to start with, for foundation piecing, it is choosing the foundation that you will be working on. This is one that I use all the time. This is Carol Doak's foundation paper. There are some other brands that you can find of this. What I like about this is the price is reasonable. So it is July of 2023, and the retail is about $16 for 100 sheets. This is copied onto, oops, not that one. This is kind of a lightweight sort of recycled paper. And since you need 28 of them just for this quilt alone, this is by far the best deal. And this is the one that I use the most often. But there are some times that foundation piecing can get confusing. So the Vellum would be the next choice. So this one is Simply Foundations translucent vellum paper. It runs about $19 as of this date and time for only 30 sheets. But there is, for some people, a huge advantage to use this. So you can see here that you can see right through it. Whereas this one, you can't. Now you can lift it up into the light and see through it that way. But when you are just starting out with foundation piecing, you might find this vellum to be really, really helpful. When I have students that struggle with foundation piecing, this is what I pull out. And then they just get it because they can see the other side. All right. So choose whichever one of those that you want. The next step is to trim these down whoops, let's keep them straight there. Trim these down to approximately, doesn't have to be exact, but 1/4 of an inch bigger than the actual design. So I am cutting through 2 of the papers at this time. I typically cut through, 10 or more, because this is not the part that requires precision. This is just the part of cutting it out 1/4 of an inch bigger. So that, and it's really just so that the paper doesn't get in your way as you're working with it. Okay, get that out of the way. And then we are ready to begin. So I like to start, and I kind of like to, this isn't chain piecing, but I do kind of get an assembly line going when I'm doing this. So I'm going to get my pieces all trimmed out. Then I'm going to flip them over, and I'm at this point going to switch to another camera. And this camera is going to have, I've got a light board underneath it. So this is my daylight light board, and it has a cutting surface on top. I'm going to use this so that you can really see what I'm doing through all the paper, whether or not I'm using the Carol Doak paper or the translucent. So starting with, here is the tools I use. This is my Clover Mini Iron, and you can see the head on this. It has a low and a high setting. I'm always going to set it on high. I also am usually going to store this in a mug so that it doesn't get anything hot, because this is hot all the way down to there. Now, it is not super duper hot. They made a Mini Iron 2 that got really hot. It had a red casing around the end. I wouldn't recommend that one. I do like this one, though, that is just as hot as I need it to be. Then we are going to use the very popular, and can't do paper piecing without it or foundation piecing without it, the Add a Quarter. And this is from CM Designs. And all of the products are available in the links below the video. I don't think I said that in the last couple of videos, but keep that in mind in the links below. This is the 6-inch version of the Add a Quarter. Keep in mind, it comes in many sizes. There's the Add a Quarter Plus. There's the Add an Eighth that I've used before. There's a lot of different sizes of this, but this one being the most popular. And the idea is there is a lip underneath on the back side. There's actually a lip, so that from that lip, oops, you can't see that in the light there, from that lip to the cutting edge is a scant 1/4 of an inch. Works fabulous when you want the back of your blocks to be really, really pretty, and I always do. Now, I do save this piece of cardboard. I fold it back a little bit, but I'll show you why I would save that piece of cardboard. Next is a newer product on the market. This is called, let's see, there we go, Acorn Precision Piecing, and this is the Seam Align Gentle Hold Fabric Glue. Now, I got to tell you, when I am paper piecing or foundation piecing, I'm not usually going to use this product. If I'm doing foundation piecing where the pieces are very small, like when I did the Snowflake Lone Star, those pieces were very small and they really had to be precise, and I was only using an 1/8 of an inch seam. So for that, I love using this product. And it's different than the other fabric glues out on the market. Now, you've heard me talk about Roxanne's fabric glue, the basting glue. Use it all the time, but not for this. It does not quite dry quick enough for the way that, I don't know why, I'm not sure what the magic is, but just know that there's a link below. You can get a bottle of it and give it a try, and it really, really goes a long, long ways. All right, so back to where we were. So here we have, this is the Acorn. Oh, there it is, the Acorn Precision Glue. Next is going to be a standby. This is my fabric glue. I like the Yoo-Hoo Stic Magic Blue fabric glue, and I'll show you how I use that. I have a smaller cutting surface, and then I'm going to use a 28mm rotary cutter because that just makes foundation a lot easier. Right? Now, I'm going to start by using my fabric glue, the glue stick, to glue down my center squares. So I just took and smeared it around the square and put it down, and I can see by flipping it over very clearly that I have it about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So I'm going to do the same thing all the way on these 3 that I have. If I'm doing this process at home, I'm going to do it on all of them. I'd get all 28 of them, smear all the glue on, and go to the next one. So I'm not going to be chain piecing per se, but I do kind of an assembly line. After this it is going to be time to put on our first triangles. But before we can do that, we need to trim at least the A2 and the A3 down to the 1/4 of an inch. So that's where this little piece of cardboard comes in. Line up the piece of cardboard right on the next sew line. So this is the A1 piece. This is the A2. I'm going to line it up here on the A2 and then flip this over. The cardboard just helps you keep that fold really nice and straight. Then you're going to take your add 1/4 ruler and place it so that that bump, that, the back end that I said was raised, is right there next to your cardboard. And then you can trim. Now you may have a lot to trim. You may have a little bit to trim. You'll see throughout the differences. Now I'm going to flip it around because I can. I'm going to trim both of these at the same time. So this is my A3. Going to fold that back. This time I'm going to have a lot to trim because the squares are actually larger than you need them to be. So I would go through and I would do that on all of the ones that I have done the glued pieces. Oops, I think my light just went really, really bright. Let's dim that down again. There. All right. So I've got quite a few that I have done that to already in my assembly line process. Now it's going to be time to use that Acorn Precision Glue. Take off the cap. And for the first squares, you can only do one side at a time. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to put dot, dot, dot. That is all. Then I'm going to put this down, centering it up. Then I'm going to grab my next one. And I'm going to put dot, dot, dot. So I will sit and I will stack all 28 of these. By the time I am ready to sew them, they will be, oops, I got to flip that over. They will be, let me double check. Yep, right there. They will be actually ready and dried. So when I go to my sewing machine, I can just pick them up. I don't have to worry about pinning. I don't have to worry about the fabric sliding on me. I can just take this to the machine and sewing on this line. So that's where I added, oops, not quite dry yet. I told you it does take a second. So when I do all 28, they dry really, really quickly. And then I'm going to just sew right on the line, starting at the line and ending at the line. And to do that, when you set up your sewing machine, set your sewing machine up with the needle in the center position and make your stitch length a little bit smaller. And you will see that if you use your open toe applique foot, love using the open toe applique foot for this, on my machine, I can exactly see where I'm sewing. If my needle is in the center position, I can see that line and I can just stitch right on that line with my open toe. And then I come to the end and I just stop. There's no need to do a back stitch. If you feel you want to, you can, but it really isn't necessary, which kind of surprises me. I always think that maybe it would be better if it was. But you cannot do both of the triangles at the same time. So this is one that I've already sewn on. And if you see from the back side, whoops, I sewed right on the line, starting at the line and ending at the line. I do not sew past the line, which will make more sense. All right. Now, this one, I only trimmed the one side, so now I've got to trim the other side. So to do that, oops, sorry, going back and forth, I need to first press that triangle. Boom, boom. It is now pressed. Now, keep in mind, I did spray size these with the magic spray sizing before I started this. So my fabrics really lay really nice and flat. Now I'm going to go to my next seam line, fold over, and trim. Now, I'm not able to do on this, the first square, I'm not able to do both of them at the same time, because if I did, this guy comes so close to the next seam that you'll end up stitching down the very point of there. So after I have done the trimming, again, use your precise glue, and I would be doing all 28 just like this. Maybe do one as a tester and then do the rest of them. So then I'm going to take my next one and glue it down, and my next one and glue it down, and my next one and glue it down. And then I can take all of these to the sewing machine at once. Then I'm going to have it look like this. So I've got my two pieced on. All right. Now I'm going to flip it over and time to trim. So the process is trimming. There's going to kind of be a little rhythm to this in a second. Trim. Oops, got to get a little bit deeper there. After you've trimmed, flip it over. Place, so going to use my glue. 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, and I rarely ever have to, even on long seams, I only use like 3 dots of this stuff, so it really does last forever. Then I'm going to put my next piece down. So after I've done the trim, the press, the trim, then I'm going to place, now I'm going to sew. So I'm going to take this that's been glued in place to my sewing machine, and again with my open toe applique foot, I'm going to sew on that seam. After I have sewn that seam, flip, flip to another one. Oops, got too many here. There. So after I have sewn on that seam, I'm going to again flip to the back side, trim that with my add a quarter ruler, flip it back over, do my 3 dots of glue on all of my pieces. So I'll have 27 or 28 of them, and do that. And glue, 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 glue. After I have glued them all, flip them all over and sew on the line. Come back and do the pressing. So this is approximately what it should look like once you have all your blue first set of triangles going around. At this point, you can actually trim and set 2 at a time. So this is what I mean. Flipping it over from the back side, I'm going to look at my next sew line. So that is going to be number 6 and number 7. I'm going to use my cardboard. And I've got a lot to trim off now because with foundation piecing, you always cut your pieces larger than you think you need. So I've trimmed off the one for 7. Now I'm going to go back and trim off the one for 6. So I can trim both at the same time because now the triangles are set far enough away from each other that I can glue them both in place now. So, and that's going to make this whole process even go a little bit faster, which is why I like the precision piecing, because it goes a little bit faster instead of doing foundation piecing. But when you use products like this, using the right tools for the job, it will make the process even go faster. All right. So I'm going to glue both of these on all of the pieces that I'm doing, then take them all to the sewing machine and sew on the lines. Oop, this one's got some extra lines, but here I've sewed here and here. That gets me so that I have my 2 triangles on. Now I can again do the double trim. So I've already trimmed here. I'm going to fold, trim here. After a while, you don't even have to use the cardboard. I honestly don't, but students find it much more helpful. Okay. So now I've got the 2 trimmed. Now I can do the dot, the dot, the dot, and then come over here, dot, dot, dot. Take my triangles, place them, centering them as best you can. I usually like to take like the point of this and come right down into the point of the square. And like this one, stack up all of them at once. Then I can take that to the sewing machine and sew on those next sew lines. Then I'll go to my final triangles, which I've already glued these and stitched these in place. So you can see now when you're at the final pieces, you, instead of having to start at the line and end at the design line, I actually start all the way off the paper. So starting off the paper here, sewing all the way down, and then I can actually chain piece, so I can go from here to my next one to my next one in traditional chain piecing, then come and do it on the other side. All right. Now I'm going to do the pressing. Again, using my little Clover Mini Iron. And yep, I know I'm right on top of my cutting surface, but that's okay. If you're just pressing through the fabric, it does not hurt your cutting surface. All right. Now I'm going to do this trim. So to do this trim, because I have sewn off the design, I have to tear a bit of the paper. So it's just like a preemptive tear. You're going to have to tear everything off sooner or later anyhow. And then to the other side. Now I can fold this back. And now I'm going to trim this whole thing off. And this is a question always happens. A student in class will go, they'll put their ruler down and they're like, trimming the whole thing? Even those little guys? Yep, you're trimming the whole thing. Okay. Then come to the other side. Again, give the paper a little tear just to where the design is. The first one's always the harder one. I don't know why. All right, she's giving me a fit just because I'm on camera, right? And then come to the other side. There we go. They're both torn. Now I can do the fold and trim both of these. After I've done the trim on 2 of them, then just like with the others, I can do my dot, dot, dot of glue, and then here. So again, this Acorn Precise Seam Glue, really, really nice when you're doing a lot of the same kind of foundation piecing blocks, because you just sit and glue them, and then you take them all after they're all glued, then the bottom one's dry, and then you're ready to sew it. So to sew this one, I would be sewing on the 2 sides, again, going all the way from the outside, all the way to the other side, so that the block should look like this. Now, once the block is set like this, oops, I did my light again. Once the block is set like this, then I'm going to take it to the ironing board with my big iron, and I'm going to use the spray sizing. So like the Magic Craft Quilting and Craft spray, that spray sizing, and I'm going to spray it again to really stiffen it up before I then flip it over to the back side and square this up to the size that the design has asked for. And this design has asked for this to be 5 3/4 inches. Now, technically, the outside line should be 5 3/4 inches, but you want to double check that. Don't just trust, because with copy machines and things like that, I'm going to put down my ruler and line up the lines as best I can, trying to go, all right, I think that that is pretty much set. Wonder where my large, there it is. I'm going to use my large cutter so I can get through all the seams. Okay. You know what? I just found another product now that I'm sitting here showing this one. I want to show you. This one is called Grippy. This is from Odif, the same people that make the 505 basting spray that I love so much. This is to make your rulers a little bit not slippery. Now, keep in mind, I don't use them on all my rulers. I need my rulers to be a little slippery when I'm doing many of my cutting techniques. But when it comes to squaring things up, it's going to help if it does not slide much. So I just put the slightest little bit of the Grippy on there. Now I'm going to place my ruler, centering it all up so that I can trim it down. So here, from left to right, seems like I'm spot on, but from top to bottom, it's a smidge off from the copying. Then I can cut on the right side, slow and steady. Cut on the top side. Now flip that over, and that Grippy is making it's not sticking to my mat, but it's making it so that when I'm doing these larger square cuts, it's not going to slide as easily. So I'm just starting to get used to that product. And again, all the products are going to be listed below. All right, so now my block is all trimmed, looking quite beautiful. Look at how these edges are the 1/4 of an inch from the side, just like you want them to be. Now I'm going to peel off the paper. Now the trick to peeling off the paper is to peel it off in reverse order. So here it is, number 13, the final piece that I put on. Then I'm going to flip it over to 12, always folding back, pulling off the paper. Now I'm going to go to 10 and 11. Got to tear that a little bit because that got stitched down. Fold back. Now, I've had people ask me, why do you have to sew all the way off the edges on the final seams? And it's so that the design is actually held together. If you don't sew off the edges here, when you're done, this seam will be free. It'll be flipping up. You will not get the stability that you want out of that block. So be sure that you do sew off the edges. I'm going to take these little triangles out. And now I need to get the pieces out from in here. So I'll just take and give this just a little bit of a tug. When I did that little tug, a little bit came out from underneath the seam. So now I can just peel that back. Get that working very gently all the way around. This is, when I make all 28 of them at once, that means that I'm taking off the paper while upstairs watching TV, honestly. Oops, got this last good little guy. All right. So here again, I'm just going to kind of pull that seam a little bit, and then I can get my thumb underneath it and peel up all of those papers. All right. So that is the foundation piecing technique for doing the square in a square. I hope you like it. If you've never done foundation piecing before, you just got to start it. And I always recommend with my beginners that they do at least 4 to 8 blocks right away once you kind of get the system. So just follow the steps one after another. So you're doing the placing of the piece, the sewing of the piece, the pressing, the trimming, then place. No, trim, trim. Then place, sew, press, trim, place, sew, press, trim. And you'll just kind of get yourself in a rhythm. Try using some of these other products if you've never done it before. The Vellum really can make things a lot easier. And that seam alignment glue, keeping everything exactly where you want it to be, it's really pretty priceless. So below are all of the products that I've used. If you're interested in looking at any of those, or if you have any questions about them or anything that I've taught you, go ahead and send me an email at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. Please give me a thumbs up if you like the video and maybe a comment or two. And hope you enjoy the rest of your day.